Canon made a few announcements this week regarding some new cameras and capabilities. Let's talk about one in particular, the Canon Powershot G16. They may have skipped a couple of version numbers along the way, but the Powershot G line has a storied past. Even my Powershot G7 here holds up pretty well today, and I still use it from time to time. The G16 is the latest incarnation. Before we talk about capabilities, let's get a few things out of the way. This is an advanced point-and-shoot camera. It's not a DSLR with a big fat sensor, nor does it support interchangeable lenses. This is a jack-of-all-trades, ready-to-shoot, image-capturing machine that will go and go. This isn't going to replace anyone's pro DSLR, and I know a lot of you do like your top-end gear. This is a more forgiving camera that can help a less experienced photographer get great shots while giving advanced users some of the manual control that they're looking for. And does it have a few tricks up its sleeve? Sure, it has some of those too. I don't have one here in the lab. Few people do at this point. But let's talk about the specifications and what they mean to the casual photographer, or in expert hands. This is a 12 megapixel camera, and I'm glad. For a smaller sensor, I want relatively large pixels. Frankly, it would have been fine as a 10 or even a 6 megapixel camera. But I'm glad that they didn't try to pack 18 or 20 megapixels into this thing. That would just serve to muddy up the images a bit. The star of the show is the 28 to 140 millimeter equivalent field of view lens, with variable aperture from f1.8 to f2.8. 140 millimeters at f2.8, that's great for any camera. You can't take the lens off, but with that fast aperture range, I'm not sure that I'd be reaching for a different lens anyway. Another star of the show here is the Optical Viewfinder. A viewfinder is a big deal to me, and they're disappearing fast on newer compact cameras. I'm glad that Canon has kept this feature as part of the G series legacy. With the fast lens, you also have an ISO range up to 12,800. Now, what will high ISO images look like on this relatively small sensor? That remains to be seen. With the fast aperture lens, though, you can keep a lower ISO than with many other cameras in the class. One surprise, given Canon's recent direction, is that the G16 does not have a touch screen, like they do on several of their newer consumer cameras. That's not a huge deal, and I will gladly work without it as long as they keep that viewfinder intact. You've got the scene and exposure modes that you'd expect from an advanced compact, even the cool ones like fireworks, snow, and underwater scene modes. Even when you know how to set everything in those situations, sometimes it's just fun and easy just to turn the dial to the mode you want and fire away. It doesn't have to be just fun and games though. You've got exposure compensation, custom white balance setting, spot metering, and a flash hot shoe. In other words, you have the easy-to-use consumer-friendly aspects, also with the features that you raw and manual shooters desire when you want to take total control. It even has an electronic level. That's not a deal breaker one way or the other, but it sure is nice to have. Want performance? It will give you 12 frames per second for your first 6 shots, and then a sustained 9.3 frames per second for 500 shots. That's really decent and exceeds the speed of the majority of DSLRs. Yes, folks, it's a compact, but some of these specs really show how far this class of camera really has come. And RAW shooters, you can select your aspect ratio for RAW images and also shoot RAW plus JPEG. Let's briefly talk video. There are a number of different video modes, with the top option being 1080p at 60 frames per second. A great many current generation cameras can only do 60 frames per second at 720p, so points for the G16 here for 1080p at 60 frames per second. Oh, one more thing, Wi-Fi on board. No special memory card needed. As we rely more and more on this to share photos and other social information, Wi-Fi in the camera helps you get great shots right to your phone or laptop without having to worry about whether or not your phone's camera is up to the task of what you're trying to capture. Guys, I love my G7 and these other smaller cameras that I have, but I'm not going to run right out and buy a G16. Now, if you aren't already flush with cameras and are looking for a capable compact as your primary camera, or as a smaller on-the-go alternative to your DSLR, I'd definitely consider the G16 as one to look at.